Okay, so for this tutorial, what we're going to do today is we are going to do a placeable. Now, I went online and I found this really cool looking throne that I wanted to take out of Final Fantasy here, and I'm going to put it into Neverwinter Nights as a placeable. I'm going to try and do this quick. I'm not going to be too over-explanative, but I will say a few things as I'm going along that I feel that are important to the process. Okay. So doing this tutorial means that you've kind of watched some of my other ones and you know how to import certain items into your scene, and you know how to pull certain placeables or objects from the vanilla files. So what I did is I went and found a throne, just a general throne, just to keep it nice and simple and easy. And I went to the tool set. I found this throne here, okay, and I went ahead and looked up the tag, and the name of the actual throne is the placeable_MC throne. Went through the vanilla files, found it here, placed it into a working directory in my override, and I also have the XPS file here, which is the mesh for the Final Fantasy VII throne. Now, I haven't opened this up, but I'm pretty sure everything's going to be okay, so kind of doing this on the fly. So I'm going to close that out. Don't want that open while we work. Drop a few things, and go ahead and fire up Blender. Okay, I'm going to import my throne first off. Just going to remove doubles. No need to find an armature because it doesn't have one, or it's not a head model. And it's usually in my override, and I think I have it under placeables, bone throne, and here it is. Now, when you open up a placeable, you should get something like this. These boxes, and if you saw my other tutorials, normally you get these other type of boxes. Never delete them. They serve a purpose. Just because they're a square doesn't mean they're rendered that way. These boxes are more like collisions, or for referencing certain things in game and tags. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to turn off the viewport for C2 and C3. And we don't want to delete them, because if we look here, they have a special color to them, and there's a reason for that. Is they're smart materials, and they talk to the engine, and they have an effect. So deleting those would not be beneficial to creating your placeable. The only one thing you will edit is the actual throne itself. In this case, we'll go ahead and place over it a new object. You can actually edit the throne if you want to, simply redesign it. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place over it, and just like the weapons, thrones aren't placeables aren't really attached to an armature, so there's no need to work with this column or this category, the modifiers, and you don't have to usually work with the data column for adding weights and vertex groups and such. All you need to work with really is having this correct, which is your material, and having your textures correct. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and import XPS here, and I'm going to import my new bone throne, and it always puts you in the same folder you last worked in, which is the bone throne folder. Remove the colorized meshes, and I'm going to double click here, open up the throne. It may take a second. This is a pretty big file, I'm sure. Okay, that might need to be decimated in the end. All right, so here it is right here, and if you've seen my other videos, I explained this to you. Normally it imports with an actual skeleton in it, and the skeleton is just an armature. It's weighted to some sort of rig. So I'm gonna go ahead and combine these two, because I know for certain these two are on the same map, and to tell that, we can click between them too, and we'll notice that the textures that they're connected to they're the same. So really, it's just the reason they're separate is because one of them is the ground. And if I turn that off, one of them is that. So it all depends on what you want. I'm gonna keep the ground. Actually, let me take a look if I put it under texture here. Let me see. Perhaps I'll remove that. That way there's more you can integrate more into it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and delete the ground file. This is just a plus. Normally they come all together. And so this is our throne. I'm viewing it from the front side by pressing 1. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to place this over where I want it to be. Now keep in mind that the throne was an actual size, so I think the player is about yay high, and the throne is that much, so this is really big. You can always turn it up in the toolset to make it bigger. I'm gonna make it a fairly big itself. If anything, it may just shrink a little bit, but not so much, because I want the throne here to match the size of this throne there. Okay, so to do that, I am going to first separate this from its armature by clicking on the actual object. I'm gonna hit Alt P, and you can clear the parent, or you can clear and keep transformation. I usually choose the second one just to play it safe. And now that I've done that, it's moved it out of the rig that it was connected to, and I can go ahead and delete that rig because it serves no purpose now. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and select this back, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply try and line this throne up with the throne in game. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you certainly want it to be at a good scale, because there's no point in putting an oversized throne. And this would be a throne for a human. If you wanted to make it for like a devil or like a demon lord or a beast, you can pump it up as big as you want, but you can also do that in the tool set, so there's no point in doing it here. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and leave it there. Okay, that's quite a lot of pixels, but we can decimate that in the end. I'm gonna turn off the original throne. I'm gonna go into here by pressing edit mode, and if I press L as I hover over the object, I can select things by linked groups, and these are all linked together because they're all touching, and they're little groups within the mesh itself. And I'm just picking out here, and what I can do, and I know it looks confusing, I've had practice doing this, so forgive me if I'm going too fast. I didn't want to linger on this tutorial, so I am going fast for a reason. Don't want to lose your don't want to wear your patience in this, and I don't want to lose your attention because it can get quite boring when I'm just talking and not doing things. So almost done. The reason what I'm doing here is I'm selecting all of the roots to the throne, because I want to size this up just a little bit, because I do want to make this for a being, like maybe a bigger monster, a bigger type of being. So what I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and click S to scale, and I'm just going to scale it up a few notches, maybe 1 or 2. That's about 3 notches, and then I'll bring it back up and kind of place it back to where it was, so that way it's really not out of proportion. Now that's just that's the original throne. I just brought it up some because I really wanted this to be for some sort of monster, some sort of something other than human, something bigger than human, because it's a pretty big throne itself. You don't have to do this. If you have your own throne, you can do whatever you want. That's a given. Sure, design. Okay, so that's exactly how I'm going to do it. Now you can always do this and then scale it up in Blender. I'm just going to do this to keep it like that. Okay, so we're done. That's it. That's pretty much how you make your placeable. Well, the first part, that's pretty much how you place where you're going to put your placeable. All we're going to do now is we're going to steal all of the properties from this throne, and we're going to place it onto our new throne. And to do that, we have to first analyze the first throne. Now, I'm saying first analyze. I know what's on it, but I'm just going to go through it real quickly with you so you can see what's on it. As you can see, it has no modifiers, it has no mesh data, it has one material, and it has its own specular settings, and it has its 2 textures. That's all you need then, is 1 material and 2 textures, or how many textures your throne has. So that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to copy the name by double clicking, hit Control C, and then I'm going to go ahead and it can stay hidden. Actually, I'm going to delete it, because what happens is if I try to paste the name here, it's going to give me a .001 instance. Is not what I want to do. I actually want to be I want it to be the PLC MC throne, the main version variant. And the reason why it's throwing .001 is because it can't have the same name as another object. So it's pretty much like saying .A, .B, .C, or it's the first variation. If I were to change this to the same thing, it would say .2. but you don't want to touch that. I want to leave that alone, and I'm going to come back here and I'm going to undo a few things because I don't want to follow that process. So I'll go back to where I was and hit Control C, and I'll go ahead and delete it. Okay, and I'm going to copy it here. Now that that original one was deleted, this will take the main name, and as you see, I did that, and now it doesn't have a .001 because the other one is gone. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that my the name of my object in the scene here matches the name of the material, and it matches the name of the data. So if these three do not match, the game will not recognize the placeable. So I'm going to copy this again. It should already be copied in your clipboard, and I'm going to paste here, and it's giving me the .001 instance. I'm going to just paste again, and it's going to override this as the main one. And I'm going to do the same thing here for my material. Now if you have this going on, I'm just going to click this to turn off nodes, pending on what kind of object or placeable you're bringing, whether it be from another game, whether it be from something you created yourself, then of course you would know what that is, or you got it from online, or you bought it or purchased it from CG Trader or something like that. Either way, turn off nodes. If that's double, you'll know because it says node. Turn it off, and then just go ahead and paste again, and then paste again. You don't have to double click to paste. You can simply just hover over it and press Control V, and it pastes for you. Okay, and the textures are kind of already set. The textures apply only to this material. If I were to make a new material, I would have to create more textures for this material. So it all depends. But the game only recognizes one material, so you never need more than one material for your placeable. There are exceptions to that, but I won't get into them at this point. All right, so what I'm going to do here for my materials, I'm just going to go ahead and set my specular settings. This determines how light interacts with my object, and I find it easier if I set it RGB to 0.8 all around the table. And then I set my intensity to 0.8 as well, and my hardness to about 100 to 150. You can go 200 if you want, but it all depends. I find that 100 to 150 usually work for most objects, and it gives off a realistic light and a realistic shine to the object. Okay. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go here. I want to make sure I have no vertex groups, because if you remember the first placeable throne, it had no vertex groups. Plus there's no need for a vertex group because that's just weights, and we have nothing to weight it to, so there's no point in having it. All right, turn off the vertex colors or delete them. They're not needed. That's just because it came from a different game, and that's what the other game used. And we can go ahead and exit out. It has no armature attached to it, so this is really serving no purpose. But for the sake of just being clean, let's just go ahead and delete that and make sure that's empty. So we have an empty modifiers tab. We have our data tab matching the names together, which reference each other, which is good. And we have our UV map. Now that can say UV1 or UV map, whatever it says. When we export it out, it's going to automatically change to UV map. So there's no point in touching that or worrying if that doesn't say UV map, because the original throne, it says UV map here. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing. Okay, in the materials tab, we want to make sure once again that our object matches the name of the material, which it does, and we have our specular settings to how I believe work the best. Okay, you can adjust those to your own liking later on, or as you're doing this tutorial, whenever you're doing your own placeable. And usually the textures come pre-assigned to the material if you're pulling it from another game, which I did. However, what I did is I went ahead and I opened up these textures in Photoshop, and I saved them out as Targa files, but I also did rename them because I didn't like the name, because it has this little dollar symbol in the name, and the engine does not read that very well, so it's going to show up as a missing texture when we load it into the game. So what I did is I renamed them out. I saved them out as Targa files, just named as bonethrone_D for diffuse map and bonethrone_N for normal map. This is the diffuse and this is the normal map. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to correct that here in my textures. Now, if you have your own placeable, sometimes you don't have to take that route. Sometimes you did this all beforehand. That's fine. But in this case, I didn't, so I'm going to correct that here. So to do that, I'm going to go on my diffuse map. I'm going to go to source. I'm going to find the source of where it's at, and I have it here in Bone Throne. And I'm going to click bonethrone_D. All right. I'm going to copy the name of that image file right here, bonethrone_D. I'm going to hit Control C. I'm just going to paste it here where it says image, and and I'm going to paste it here where it says unique identifier. Okay, and it changes the name of this. This is what, when you render out the object to an MDB, it's going to look for this name for the file. Okay, it doesn't look for the name here. It just, whatever's in here is what it's going to look for. So it's going to assign that texture as a diffuse map. So I'm going to click the normal map. Now I'm going to do the same exact thing, except choosing the normal map. And I'm going to do what I did earlier by selecting the name, Control C, and just hovering over here, hitting Control V, hover here, hit Control V. Okay. And each map is already assigned. All of this should be taken care of. You have no need to worry about this. Yeah, see, it's set to normal map and everything is set already because it was all done prior via where I ripped it from. Okay, so now that that's done, we are nearly complete. We have our placeable, except that we have these two meshes. We have the C3 and C2. Now what these are specifically for, one is more of a selection mesh and one of them is to help with visibility. There are reasons they are there, but generally what you want to do is you want to make sure that these meshes surround your object because it helps it helps for various purposes when rendering it in game. Now I'm not going to get too much in detail as far as how it renders and what they do, but I'm going to tell you that they do need to cover your object. So I'm going to do this in the very simplest fashion. You can be as intricate as you'd like. The choice is your own. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale it up. Now I'm going to scale it up in object mode, that way it sticks to the ground as I scale it. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and try and cover as much of my object as I can. Now it's similar to making LO1 and LO2 files for those who are more advanced and understand what that process is or what that means. But pretty much what I want to do is I just want to go ahead and cover my object altogether. So there's one way to do it, or you can simply start creating your own meshes by using the mesh primitives here and just attaching them to your object. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a cube. Okay, I'm going to bring it in here and I'm going to kind of cover my object as much as I can. Okay, oops. Uh-oh. Let's go and center that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make this cube. I'm just going to add a little bit of just going to go ahead and subdivide it a few times. Subdivide. Doesn't have to be too much. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to wireframe mode. And this is what doing the placeable. I'm going to go ahead and hold down Control, or you can press B and select some of these faces. And we are going to pull them over. Okay, basically what we want to do is we just want to cover this entire thing just by using this mesh here. I have a change of plan. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and select everything. I'm going to center it and then I'm going to scale it on the Y axis, which is the front and back, and I'm going to pull it like this, and then I'm going to go ahead and rotate. Actually press number 1 to go to the front view. I'm going to scale on the X axis. The reason I know it's the X is because Z is up and down, X is left and right based on the front orthographic view that I'm in. Scale on the X, just like that. And as you can see, we're getting somewhere now with this. What you can do now is you have various options with getting the height done. What I'm going to do is I'm just simply going to pull it up from the actual object here by selecting these 4 faces. So I'm going to go ahead and select it in face mode. I'm going to select this one, this one, this one, this one. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and pull it upward. Okay. Pull it back some. Pull it up a little more. Okay. And then I am going to... It doesn't have to be accurate. It just has to be fitting enough. And what I'm going to do is now is I'm going to select these faces by just turning and right clicking to select, and I'd like to subdivide them a little bit. Okay, and that gives me more play, so I can pull this one out and maybe just pull it to cover that branch. And you know, that's pretty good. Now if I wanted to get specific, I can select these front faces and I can just go ahead and pull them in a little bit. Maybe I'll go down here and I'll turn on proportional editing. This simply means I'm editing now by a brush size. So I get my brush here and I can edit based off that brush size. It just adds a little more influence to what you're trying to do. So something like that. It just adds more influence to, instead of just these two faces, it's whatever this brush can carry. So there we go, just like that. Okay, and that's pretty good. And the reason I left it there is because what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna merge it into this red, because we want it to have the smart material as the C2 object. And I find the fastest way to do that is to simply go ahead and grab the cube and double and shift click into the red one and just hit Control J, and now it's merged with it and we're good to go. If you really want to clean up, you can just select the old cube here by pressing L over it and then deleting those faces, and now we have just that red cube. Now the yellow, our collision to yellow, is pretty much the same as the red, if you see it here. That the original throne was that size. So all we have to do is pretty much do the same exact thing. In this case, what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and select all of this, and I'm going to duplicate this. Sorry, I'm going to go to front view. I'm going to hit Shift D to make a duplicate copy. Then I'm going to hit Escape. And while it's still selected, I'm going to hit P, and I'm going to part it out by the selection that I have selected. And now we have this here. So if we turn off our original, because we copied it, and now we moved it by hitting P, as you can see, as I told you, P means separate. We separated by the selection that we still had selected, and we moved it over to a new layer here. And well, I shouldn't say layer, because layers are a whole different thing in 3D, but we moved it to a whole different moved it outside to a whole new area. There, I'll say that. Okay. And now that we've done that, what I want to do is I simply want to merge that with the C2 now. And so to do that, simply I'm going to go ahead and select it. Then I'm going to shift. I can't really select in here because it's in there somewhere. So you can also hold shift and select here. And then I got that selected. I'm going to hit Control J, and now I merged them together. But if you look here, you have two different materials now, because that original one was red and the second one was yellow. The C2 was yellow. I'm going to simply delete the red, and it all takes on that one material now, so it's yellow. And if I really want to go in there, I just select this. I'm going to press H for hide. And then I'm going to select here, select this, and I'm just going to delete these faces. And then I'm going to press Alt H to unhide. Now, I apologize if I'm going too fast. Right now, my point is to show you the process in general. Later on, I will create another tutorial which will be more in depth, but this is more of giving you an introductory course of what it's like to do a placeable and how it is to do a placeable. Now, I'm going a lot slower than I normally do, because when I do this, it's almost it's sort of an automated process, and so it doesn't take me as long. I would have had this done normally by now. I may be very on my second placeable if I had to do it, and it just, because it becomes repetitive and practice makes perfect. Okay, so I'm going to turn those back on. We can go back into our texture mode. Okay, or actually we can go into our material mode so we can see the colors and all that cool stuff. All right, and we're going to leave these on. Okay, and we have our throne. Everything is ready to be rendered out and saved into game. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to override the original throne. That throne that I had showed you earlier in the map maker, or in the tool set, it's going to override that throne if all went well, which it should be. But this is a live tutorial. I'm assuming I did everything correctly, so if it messes up, we'll just kind of have to troubleshoot on the fly. So I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Export, Neverwinter Nights. And all I have to do is check the alpha test. None of this is important at the moment. You can check Smooth TF Scenes if you want, but I'm just going to leave it as is. And then I'm going to go to the Bone Throne. And this is the placeable. This is the original vanilla one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click it. And then I'm going to go to Export to Neverwinter Nights MDB. Okay, it may take a second because this is a higher poly. Now, just by that error that I saw, the little black box, something tells me that something was wrong. and I think I have an idea of what it might be. Yes, I knew that was the issue. My poly count is extremely high for this because the game itself is capable of handling such high poly. So what I'm going to do that is I'm going to go ahead and add a modifier to this. Now this is more advanced. Normally your placeable more likely will not be as high poly, but considering that this is coming from a PlayStation game, it holds a different type of poly. It can hold up to high poly. Now this is 95,000. I don't need 95,000. I'm going to dumb it down a lot. And that's going to bring it down a lot in its actual shape. But hopefully our texture will save us in the long run. Meaning we'll be saved by the texture. Now it may not look that great right here. And even 9,000 is a lot. But for the sake of cosmetics, I'm going to turn it up just a little bit. And I don't normally like it being that high, but I want to show off how nice it could look. I'm just going to go back to 0.1. Okay. So we decimated this thing down big time. Now what decimate does is it goes through and it lowers the poly count, but it does it in a smart way so as to not mess up the whole formation of the actual object. Or it tries not to break it down. It tries to break it down in a very even way, so that way you don't lose a lot of quality. This is what you have to do for some video games and some objects. If your placeable is really high, you'll have that issue. 9,000 poly is a lot for a placeable, pending on the size of what the placeable is being used for. If it's a house or something, of course, it's going to be higher poly. But if it's just going to be something like a pillar or something like a chair, you generally don't need that much poly because those things are used repetitively. So I'm going to keep it at 0.1 just to test it. If I don't like it, I can turn it up or turn it down. We'll see. But like I said, the texture should be able to save it because the textures are really high quality. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to apply that decimation. There we go. That decimation is applied. I'm going to turn these back on, and now I'm going to resave this again. File, export, Neverwinter Nights 2 in the same area. And see how big that file became, 3.66. That tells me right off the bat that was high poly. And this should save faster. And you got no error that popped up. That little error is a little syntax thing that kind of pops up here saying something was wrong. It's all in script. But now our file is 564 KB, which is great. So that would work for us. It's already in our override, so all we got to do is fire up our toolset. And I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And it should be shown right at the very beginning. You don't have to load any module or anything like that. You can just kind of preview it from the toolset if done correctly, which I believe we have done. We have our textures and everything set. So here we are. I'm going to go ahead and go to placeables. I'm going to type in throne. Caps not mandatory. And I'm going to click throne here. And I got an error right off the bat, and I think I know why that is. So it's not showing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close that out. And the reason why it's giving me an error, I believe, is because somehow it still thinks the file is at 3.66, and something tells me the export didn't happen here. Now this doesn't normally happen. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to save up this blend file, and I'm going to save it as Bone Throne, and I'm going to close it out. Now I found this works sometimes when placeables do this error. Granted, you may never run into this error, but I have in the past. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out this blend scene. And now that it's done that, somewhere in the temp cache, it's going to now allow this to render as it should. See how it's at 3.66? And it didn't save it as it should. So the game had thought it was still the same. I know it's confusing and that shouldn't happen, but this is a live let me make sure it did save the size. Yeah, it's at 9,000. This is a live test. And, well, that shouldn't be that big. We'll go ahead and scale that down some. I'm not even sure why that happened. But let's take it down a notch. All this time, someone was probably noticing that and like, what is he doing? Alright, so that might be the reason why it errored too, because that was obviously way too big for the toolset to even recognize. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to Export, Neverwinter Nights 2, Alpha Test, and I'm going to write over the Bone Throne, and it should be smaller size now. we shouldn't have to close Blender anymore, but I am going to refire my toolset. And cross my fingers. And it's loading, I believe. There we go. All right, gonna go to placeables. I'm gonna type throne and just choose that first one. Oh, no error. So, and as soon as we hit preview, it should show. And voila, here we are. We have our throne, and it looks nice. Like I said, the texture saved it. It's not the quality that it would be had it been 90,000 poly, but then again, anything at 90,000 poly is gonna look super realistic. And let's face it, this game does not need 90,000 poly to look to get the job done, as long as something looks cool. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and start a new module. I'm gonna file, new. I'm gonna make a new area to test it. I'm just gonna call this area 1's fine, exterior terrain. I'm gonna press next, make it medium. Gonna finish it, and here we go. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna place this throne just right here is fine, and I am going to maybe I'll give it a little turn. You want what it looks like in the light as I turn it. Now I know the tool set's not the best way to oops. Okay, maybe 45. All right, so let's do that. Yeah. All right. And as you can see this little thing? The reason why it's doing that is because it's measuring off this little file that we made here for this placeable, and it's kind of finding the bounding box within it. Okay, so that serves its purpose. Now, I don't want to get into depth what these do, but all I can tell you is that it helps with the visual rendering of the file. So when you walk around, your character walks around through it, or around it, based off where that mesh is, it'll automatically turn transparent, so you're not blocking your character and stuff like that. It's not a collision, so that means you'll still be able to walk through this. As a builder, you'll have to kind of cut around it and stuff like that. But I'm gonna go ahead and save this out now. I'm gonna save this module as let's see, let's save it as AAA test, because I want it to show up at the very top. Save it out, go ahead and close it, click yes. All right, and I'm going to go into game and test this thing out now. So here we go. All right, new game. I'm going to go to new module, AAA test. Go inside it, and I'm going to go ahead and select a character and choose every builder's favorite Dro or the harbor, and click start. And we are going to just pivot and check out our throne. And that is our throne. Now, as I said, we walk through it because you'll need to kind of cut around it. I don't know if this can serve an actual mechanical purpose in game. I don't think you can use chemo animations to sit on it, but it's a pretty cool thing to have. I mean, I imagine if you got your own throne and somehow put it in there and then kind of, you know, hid it somewhere inside there or found the way to do it, then you can maybe go inside and then have your character sit or whatever it is you want to do. Now, like I said, it's low poly now. Well, it's not the lowest poly. 9,000 is still pretty high, but it's being saved a lot by the texture. So when I say that, it means even though it dumbed down some of the poly, as you can see even from far away, and even when you get close up, the texture is still kind of, you know, it saves it. This texture keeps it still somewhat looking really cool, and not so simple. All right, so pretty much that is how you make a placeable. In this case, we made a throne by replacing a new throne over an old object. If you were doing a table, you would do the same thing. I generally tend to pick up an object that's similar to the one I'm making, because sometimes you find things in the vanilla file that you pull that you may have to use in your next one. It's all about studying and learning and creating more stuff. So I will go ahead and end this here and say thank you for watching, and hopefully you learned in a quick way how placeables are made. I will release another tutorial soon enough with how to do all of this in a more in-depth explanation. Yes, one of the dreadful longer ones. as if this wasn't dreadful enough. But it's gonna just have a little bit more. It's gonna go a little slower for those who found this to be challenging to follow along. Other than that, just want to say goodbye to everybody and see ya.